Hey everyone, welcome to Tickets to Travel, the only podcast that talks about the business of travel experiences. On today's episode, we are joined by our friend and consultant for travel and ticketing strategy, Natalia and our special guest today, Avante Price, the CEO of Posh. What is Posh? Posh is an innovative social ticketing platform that streamlines the creation, management, and discovery of live events. It offers a user-friendly interface for event organizers to design customized event pages, sell tickets, and engage with attendees through various marketing tools. For event goers, Posh provides an immersive experience to explore local events, purchase tickets, and connect with friends attending those events. If you'd like to learn more about this unique company's value proposition and how they just secured a $22 million investment, keep it right here and remember to hit subscribe wherever you get your podcasts because Tickets to Travel starts now. Welcome, everybody, to Tickets to Travel. I'm your host, Mario, and we are talking about the business of travel experiences. On today's episode, we have Natalia, the ticketing and travel operations extraordinaire. And then our very special guest today is Avante Price, founder and CEO of Posh Tickets. Welcome to you both.
Thank you for having us.
So Avante, you actually are in the ticketing world, the social ticketing world. Can you remember the first time it occurred to you that you had to create this company?
Wow.
I like to just get you off guard.
Yeah, I think it all started when we were in college, actually. We were juniors in college. I was a DJ. My co-founder was a photographer, and we were freelancing for a bunch of events around the New York area. We were NYU students, and we didn't really like how we were being treated. As you guys know, freelancers in the event space, especially on the long tail, like you get paid late, things are out of order, it's all kind of a mess, right? And a lot of things aren't digitized. A lot of pen and paper is still going around, right? And so in that time, we didn't think to start a software company just yet, but we at least wanted to take control over our own personal freelance projects. And so we started Posh actually as an event company. And we were just hosting weekly events for NYU and Columbia kids, local bars and speakeasies. And through that experience, we got a lot of experience with the wide array of ticketing tools that exist today, right? Namely the long tail ones. So Eventbrite, this one night out that is no longer, but was actually really good product, et cetera. And, we were churning every 2 or 3 events from platforms because each one had, certain things we liked, but certain things we didn't like. So my co-founder, who is an awesome photographer, but also an amazing software engineer, said, why are we continuing to churn across these products? Let's build our own tool for our own events. But it wasn't even supposed to be what it is today. It was supposed to just be like similar to how Soho House has their own app, right? Our own kind of internal tooling for our community. He built it in about 2 weeks, the MVP, and we launched it and we used it for 2 events. And then the pandemic happened. But across those 2 events, we had scaled from like 300 people on average per event to like 600. So we knew we had something really strong on our hands, and it was really a bummer. Obviously that time, kind of to answer your question, was we really realized that there was this need in the world for a better software solution for managing events, and especially for getting started building small IRL communities, right? So not for venues, or really for people like any of the 3 of us or, our friends to start a community and start monetizing it. And that's what we were doing, making side money as college kids. And we saw a really big opportunity there, right? In the age of Airbnb, Uber, et cetera, where anyone can monetize something that they had, right? Kind of sharing economy that we're in. Why was this not been done for events yet, right? And so that was kind of the crux of it all. We spent from March to October 2020 building out the tools we had for ourselves and kind of white labeling them, making them available to others to use. And then we launched in October 2020, had our first dollar in GMV, and that was, the rest is history.
Well, congratulations. It's a pretty amazing story. You come from being a DJ and a photographer, identifying kind of a niche in the market. From a social perspective, though, you guys really key in on that. What makes Posh a social ticketing platform?
It's a great question. What we say a lot around here is Posh is the platform where who's going is more important than who's performing or playing, right? And I think a lot of platforms categorize themselves as like music platforms, right? You look at like Ticketmaster or Dice, these other companies that are mainly focused on pushing the artists and who's going to be at the show as the main person everyone's looking at. What we care about is events where you're going not really to see one person who's a celebrity or influencer, et cetera, but really to go interact with the community that's in the room, right? And there is someone probably bringing people there that everyone knows, but at the end of the day, you're not going to just watch that person with one friend. You're going to meet other people in the room and see people that are similar to you, whether it's your background, your interests, etc.
I love that you said something at the beginning of Avante, which is when you're explaining Posh, you go into, when you're explaining the software, you say event management versus like software to distribute tickets. Can you drill a little bit more in that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot more. I actually, frankly, don't really say the word ticketing a lot. It kind of irks me. And we try not to say it here at all. We try to say, actually, funny enough, little anecdote is my friend messaged me the other day and said, hey, I'm in SF and I was meeting with some VCs and they all like asked me if I knew what Posh was. And they referenced it as the social media platform. I thought you might want to know that. And I was like, no, that's great. And I want the consumer sentiment and people that are outside of this space, right? If people that are, pitching or organizers, et cetera, like you have to tell it what it is. It is ticketing, right? It's competitive to Eventbrite, et cetera. But outside of the space from the consumer angle, we really want to be known as a social media platform. With that said, right, event management is this kind of in the same vein where ticketing is one component of event management. But there's so many other components, right? There's managing your team, there's managing your finances, there's paying out promoters and DJs. We have affiliate payouts through the platform where you can, pay people out a commission right to the platform rather than Venmo or Zelle afterwards. So it's really, the full end-to-end solution for managing that event pre to post-production rather than just like a place to sell tickets, which is, pretty lame.
Yeah, I think you're hitting on a lot of topics for the ticketing crowd that listens to this podcast, because all of those back-end things are not really considered. I think a lot of times, working at larger ticketing companies, it's really about just selling the ticket, and that's really it. Then it becomes the artist, the promoters, the venue's responsibility to entertain and make sure that fan has a great experience. But then, there's all the other stuff in the background, right? The settlements, getting paid, getting vendors set up, all those different things. So it's interesting that you guys go down this road of being a social platform that just happens to be a ticketing technology as well. So from a scalability perspective, when you start to look at, of course, you've got Ticketmaster, you've got Eventbrite. What's sort of your strategy to scale it with this type of thinking behind it on the socials? I mean, it could be very easy to hit a couple of different events or event promoters who just make this thing go viral. Is that part of your strategy, or do you guys look at it very differently from a scalability perspective?
There's really two different angles we're taking, bottoms up and tops down at the same time. And why we like to think of it as a social platform is because then you start to think about, how do I scale this as if I was scaling something like Instagram, right? And how you scale a social platform is by building a lot of network density in a very small area very, very quickly, and then having network effects evolve from there, right? And so what that looks like for us is, we have a sales team. They're going after larger accounts, larger communities, et cetera, and validating the product in these kind of newer markets that we're in, right? And so once we can get someone who does 50,000 tickets a year, that person is now bringing 50,000 new users to the platform. The next objective, right, is then the bottoms up approach, where our community team, our product team, everyone's trying to figure out, how do we convert those 50,000 people, or at least as many of them as possible, into organizers themselves, right? And that's where a lot of these ticketing companies kind of miss the mark, is they don't really have that viral loop or that ability to empower these people who maybe never hosted an event before. Maybe they don't really worth investing the time or energy, right? But at scale, right, that can have outsized returns because the CAC on these people is literally nothing when the organizer brought them into the ecosystem. So it's really about like validation and then stimulation of who in this network that's an attendee can become an organizer.
You also touched on, initially you said we also help our ideal customer profiles with pre-production. Can you also talk a little bit about that? Because event management is, okay, you create an account, you create an event, you sell tickets, but let's talk about that pre-production piece, which I think is super important.
So are you saying, like, if I'm a festival promoter and I want to understand how Posh is going to fit into the program of not just ticket sales, but everything else? Is that what you're looking at?
I think I'm talking more about the bottoms up approach that Avante just mentioned. So how do we convert our community to be event organizers themselves? That's it's one thing for you to okay, a venue, you go to a venue owner, you lease the venue, but assuming you don't have any of that, just walk us through, Avante, what Posh is doing pre-production to support your community.
For sure. Yeah, I think an interesting thing about the company is that we try to do things that don't scale in the beginning before building technology that solves these problems. So our community team is really awesome for incubating ideas that eventually become part of the product. And so right now we're hosting 3 events a month nationwide for both existing organizers, prospective ones we want to talk to, as well as other event industry stakeholders to come network. We sponsor an open bar, hors d'oeuvres, really nice venue. And we try to invite at least 100 to 200 people into the room, right? And no brands have really been investing in the long tail of the event space for, all that I know. Most of them, are investing kind of in the top end. There's conferences, et cetera. But for the person who's aspiring or wants to dip their toe in, there's not really a way to get involved. And so what we're trying to do is, A, by hosting these community events, an organizer can meet another organizer to collaborate with, or a venue owner in their city that they can collaborate with. And they're like, wow, Posh is a New York brand. But in Houston last night, for example, our head of community flew out. He hosted a 250 person mixer, a market that we don't live in, right? And those people all networked and met each other. And now they're walking away with relationships like, wow, no other brand has, invested in the ability for me to meet someone to collaborate with and get my feet wet in the space, and kind of blurs that barrier to entry. So with all that said, like the first step is just giving people these tools IRL through like bringing them together in person. And then the next step would be, to bring those tools online and figure out how to connect venue owners and organizers, et cetera, once this is more validated.
That's super interesting. I think that's the first key, like education, right? Like how can we create more creators in the economy to go out and create and sell their own events? What is, do you think, the most intimidating factor for these young creators? What are the blockers that maybe doesn't enable them to go out and create more events in this space, in the entertainment space?
It's a great question because we sent out a lot of surveys and there's 3 main things, right? Number 1 is, I don't know if I'm going to get people to come, right? It's like they're just afraid that they don't want to get embarrassed. No one wants an empty room, especially if it's your first event. Like, how are you going to come back from that, especially your first one, right? Right. So that's like top question is just like, how are you guys going to help me promote the event? Which frankly, no matter if you're an entry level organizer or someone who's a veteran, like the top problem across the industry is just how can I sell more tickets, right? But it's more of a barrier to them even beginning because they're like afraid what failure might look like, right? Number 2 is actually finding a venue. It's just very difficult for people to find a venue, especially if they're trying to host a 50, 100 person event. We usually offer them to go to platforms like PeerSpace or EventUp, et cetera. And usually that helps. Except a lot of those aren't like necessarily bars and things at all times, right? So our success team usually tries to like connect them with someone that they might know. And then the third thing is really just the financial component. So people don't want to necessarily come out of pocket. How events work, right? You have to pay before you can start making money. You have to pay venue deposit, artist deposit, whatever it might be. And so through that, we've actually started offering micro loans to organizers to try to get them kickstarted, where they basically, pay 0 interest and get a free advance on their future ticket sales to their first event. Yeah, repay it back on their first event and then go from there.
Very interesting. What do you think is so hard to market events? That was your number 1 kind of results of your survey findings. Why do you think it's so hard to sell and market events?
A good question. I think it's an inefficiency between supply and demand. I think there's definitely enough demand to fill every room of every event that's like going on, but it's not really easy for that supply to find the demand or vice versa, right? For the demand to find that supply. And so what we're doing, a lot of what we're working on, right, is kind of that and trying to figure out, through our feed, the app, et cetera, how to feed people the events that are most related to their interests and their social graph, so that you can fill these rooms, right? Because maybe there is, for example, if you look at a quintessential ticketing platform, it's going to seed the biggest events at the top, right? And so what happens is if you're doing a 30-person yoga in the park event, that's never going to get fed to the top, even though there's probably people who would love that event over the like 3,000 person rave at the top of your platform, right? And so a lot of this comes down to, what is TikTok doing? What is Instagram doing? Creating algorithms, right? And trying to pair people with the interests that they have and not make it all about just what's selling the best, because that actually creates an inefficiency. Most people also like what's selling the best is like $150 tickets, right? I don't necessarily want to spend that, et cetera. And so it's really about getting kind of underneath the hood there.
So like fine tuning like the discoverability in the platform to that.
Personalization and discovery. Yeah.
Yeah. So from a technology perspective, you guys, everybody, I think you said it best, is that they're really concerned with just selling the ticket. If you're a ticketing platform, obviously you have some social pieces that are part of Posh. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like what's a differentiator from a technology perspective that allows either the fan or the organizer to make this more of a seamless process?
Yeah, I think I could, talk about features all day, but I think it really is like a feeling that's evoked from the entire product experience on both sides that just feels elevated and feels like we're actually trying to provide you more value than just access to the event and experience, right? Like a lot of these platforms, you check out, you get your QR code, and then you're not really using it at all, right? We're, again, trying to think about this like a social media platform. How do we increase screen time in the app and communication between people? Because our North Star is like, how well are we connecting people and like building meaningful connection? And so that comes down to how do you get people to actually either, maybe I met you at an event and get your number. How can I find you, right? Or I want to know who I should meet when I'm going into this event so I don't just walk around wandering. How do I see the profile information that matters to me on who I should come up to, right? And so that's a lot of the consumer side experience that also drives conversions for the organizers, right? Because now when you have 300-400 people going, we show all their faces on the guest list. People can click through the guests, see who's going, what their profiles are, go to their Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. We just added bios. So really taking a lot of the aspects of our favorite social media platforms and providing a holistic view of like who's going, which helps the organizer drive more sales once they get, a snowball effect going, and helps the organizer, the community, consumers actually like find people to meet and get the value they were trying to get out of the event, not just the ticket.
Wow. Okay. I'm pretty sure there's no other ticketing platforms that sort of go to that length. That's really amazing. Thank you for educating me on that one, because that is a key differentiator. Switching gears a little bit, obviously this show is called Tickets to Travel. And, you've done a ton of surveys. You probably gathered a bunch of data on destinations here in North America, or maybe even globally. I'm not sure. But how do you feel, at least your community kind of approaches their events and travel? And have you guys thought about it at all?
Yeah, it's super interesting. I think we've talked a lot about the long tail. There's also a big component of the company that's about helping the larger organizers expand revenue, right? So we just found, for example, that month 12 revenue is about 3x of month 1 for people that do about $100,000 to $350,000 a year on Posh. Meaning that if you came in doing $100K a year on Posh, you're probably going to be doing about $300K a year in year 2, right? And basically, a lot of that comes down to helping them expand to new cities is kind of what I'm getting at, right? And expand into new markets and new verticals, new audiences, et cetera. And so that's kind of the next step that are like more hands-on, high-touch customer success team is working on, is like collaboration, right? Hey, you have a reggaeton audience in Miami and this person has one in New York. You guys should cross-pollinate and like do events together in each of your cities, right? Because there's probably some people that are in both markets, et cetera. And so the idea here is like, if you can help the community collaborate and find other people that make sense and are similar to them in other markets, that they can expand. We also have a bunch of travel events and things as well. I think frankly, just candidly, like the travel events, as you guys probably would know, like they're like really high ticket price. So then they want to drive down our fee a lot because like a 10% fee on a $5,000 package obviously is really expensive. While on a $30 ticket, you don't really think about that. There's a high risk of dispute and things like that. So yeah, a lot of the destination events are not necessarily the target of our kind of business, and it's not part of the mission necessarily. Like I do think you build all the strongest connections on a destination trip. So it is pretty aligned with the mission from a purpose standpoint. But I think economically sometimes.
No, that's great feedback. I mean, you're saying, we're not there just yet, but you're obviously thinking about it. It's going to happen because it's sort of the natural progression for some of your event creators to get their audience to travel, right? And then what are the components? What are the components that are needed that maybe Posh could contribute to ensure that they have a seamless experience throughout the platform? That's really amazing.
Yeah, we had a partnership with this cool company, Crew Fair. I'm sure you guys have heard of them. And they were helping us like staff or fill rooms for like a destination festival that was going on. So definitely some cool things going on there.
Attention all event goers and organizers. Say goodbye to travel headaches and hello to Crew Fair, your ultimate group travel solution for events, festivals, and sports experiences. Whether you're heading to the concert of the year, the big game, or unforgettable festivals, Crewfare gets you there with exclusive discounts on accommodations, seamless booking options, and 24/7 live support to make your trip stress-free. And for event organizers, Crewfare has you covered. Monetize attendee travel, streamline hotel room blocks, and gain powerful insights to make every event a success. With over 200,000 happy travelers and partnerships with more than 100 events, Crewfare is redefining the way we travel for moments that matter. Visit crewfare.com today to book your next event travel experience or discover how Crewfare can take your event to the next level. Crewfare, where travel meets unforgettable experiences. From a partnership perspective, there's probably, as you start to scale, there's probably quite a few others who are interested in working with you from that perspective, because everyone's trying to find a unique value proposition to attaching travel to events.
Yeah, I think experiential travel and having the actual just creator economy do and create experiential travel to their communities. I think there's so much opportunity there. But with that opportunity comes a lot of challenges, managing the risk for hotels, having the right software, having the right API connectivity. That's the not sexy part of the business, but there's definitely opportunity there. I'm curious, apart from travel itself, what other verticals outside of entertainment you guys are focused on?
Yeah, for sure. That's a big focus of the company right now, right? So, the list is frankly endless. And I think going back to my point around like personalization, you could have an endless array of verticals and only feed people the ones that are relevant to them to kind of solve for the Eventbrite issue. That's like, you go on the landing page and there's a lot of everything and you don't really know like, what's this? What is for me, right? So, but with that said, like right now, the ones that are kind of doing better than others are like scaling, I guess, second to third to nightlife would be like fitness, dating, arts and fashion, culinary experiences. So people teaching cooking classes or just like dinners. There's a cool like sushi/comedy event last night in New York. That was pretty awesome. So it's a comedian, a sushi spot. And then he basically like upsold on the omakase cost to make a spread. I think that's what's really exciting to us is like seeing new and innovative ways of people creating these like micro communities and micro events that probably wouldn't have existed before. Like that's really what the bread and butter is. And talking, back to the creator topic, right? It's like, how do we empower a creator who's monetizing strictly online to monetize their top like 1% of fans IRL? And so we have a whole community program called Creator to Curator where we're actively working with creators and saying, hey, you have a highly engaged audience. You have the, show us where they are. It might be in 3 different cities. Great. We're going to help you, right? With those microloans I was talking about before, host a 3-city tour of some, they're not artists, right? So let's work creatively together on whatever it might be. So there's like makeup content creators that like a get ready with me live and you can kind of go and like they teach you how to do your makeup or like I said, chefs doing culinary things. The list is really endless. That's why like I could talk about new verticals all day, but it really is like, we try to think of things from a first principle standpoint where like how many verticals exist on Instagram, like infinite. They still know how to tailor the content to the people that want it.
I don't know if you've ever heard this analogy before, but I used to work for a company about 10 years ago called Living Social, which was later acquired by Groupon. And Living Social was really about social experiences and events. And they created stuff like sushi and sumo. They did miniature beer festivals or just really quick jaunts out of the city to a bed and breakfast in, let's say upstate New York. And they would build this experience around it. And it feels like Posh is almost like a user-generated version of that, where you're coming up with very unique events and then marketing it to the appropriate audiences. So that I think that's amazing. It allows a creator a lot of flexibility, a lot of creativity. You touched on it a little bit previously, but do you guys provide marketing materials or resources for them? Because I think Natalia mentioned it earlier. She's like, what's the hardest part? This is what's coming back from your surveys. And I imagine that's where that feeling comes from. Is anybody going to show up? Do enough people know about the event? So what do you guys do in that realm? Because that would definitely be a differentiator.
One of the first flagship features we actually dropped the platform with in October of 2020 was our SMS CRM. We were like, no one really has a marketing CRM. And the only ones that did had email at the time. And we were like, email is dead and SMS is actually really strong. Now SMS is kind of going downhill as well. But that was a really, really powerful differentiating feature at the beginning, and that we've, continued to build now for the last 4 years, where basically every customer that's been to your events before, you can send out SMS blasts to re-engage them. And people sell like 30% of inventory on one blast when they launch tickets without having to like go pay a Klaviyo or something else as well, and like kind of work with third-party tools, but also help you filter by on-platform data. So like how much people have spent, how many events they've been to. You could give out promo codes to more loyal guests, et cetera. So it really help you like segment your audience and then send out these targeted SMS campaigns to, engage them. But there's a bunch of other stuff. I think a lot of it also is like just context on like a lot of really early people like don't even know how the promoter model works. And so our customer success team is really less of like a product oriented customer success team. Like they'll ramp you up on how to use the product, demo or two. And it's really, they're really business partners, right? And they're kind of coaching these people through, if you have a book of business of 100 accounts, then you can kind of see the trends of who's winning and who's not doing so well, and then give feedback to the other accounts on like what the right things to do are. And so, yeah, it comes back to that coaching element, right? Which really does help them drive that business and, 3x, year over year, which is like, hey, have you thought about onboarding promoters? Oh, how would I get them? Oh, you should go and, hit up the DJ's friend or something. Who knows, right? But like just giving little tidbits of advice and putting them in the right direction, I think actually is more powerful than like any feature really. You could build a bunch of features, but at the end of the day, like 90% of the work is done off platform in IRL. So it's really about like just giving them those tools, the network, the community events.
Yeah, I feel like marketing events is, to your point, Avante, is so tricky because you're selling something that's in the works, that hasn't happened. Like it's not real. It hasn't happened. It's in the future. So definitely accessing and getting in touch with community via SMS. I've seen it in my work experience. It does work. It is a declining field for sure. But other than SMS, what is like a product feature, maybe if you feel comfortable answering this, that you're thinking about building to really productize marketing even more?
Yeah, it goes back to kind of what I've been saying around personalization. So I think something that's really exciting and why we're so sold on that is where our North Star metric is not revenue or GMV. Every week at all hands, we tell everyone the only metric that matters is how many marketplace transactions happen this month. And you might think like, well, doesn't like revenue matter more than that? And not really, because marketplace transactions reflect how well the platform is growing in tandem, right? On the supply and demand side. Because if marketplace transactions are going up, that means that supply is good supply that consumers want, and that consumers are coming back and driving sales to the events on the platform. So for example, month to date, we're at 24% marketplace contribution, meaning 24% of the platform orders that came to the platform in the last 14 days, or at November 14, came to the marketplace, not driven by the organizer themselves. So when you pair that with, 30% ability to sell an SMS plus 24% from us, we're selling out more than half your tickets just by launching your event on Posh and using a couple features. And the For You algorithm, you don't have to do anything. You just launch your event. Now, obviously, it's kind of a chicken and egg problem where you're not going to launch your event and it's going to immediately do well in the marketplace. You need to push some of your own traffic to it to drive it up so that people are seeing it earlier in their feed. So some organizers, will join and be like, oh, I launched my event. Why aren't there any marketplace sales? It's like, because the algorithm is not going to push that, right? And so it's kind of like you help us, we help you in tandem. So it also aligns the incentives where no organizers that are like kind of using other platforms, but listing on us are going to get pushed to the top. It's the people who are like running their businesses legitimately through Posh. But yeah, I think, again, people should not need marketing degrees to run their businesses. You should do it for them. And really it comes down to like, if you can match the right consumers with their brand, then like, it's just about them making a cool flyer and page that like converts well. Because beyond that, it's really up to the platform to like drive the right people to it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know you very well, Avante, but you sound like a data guy. You sound like you're in the numbers quite a bit.
Little tune the numbers, yeah.
And so data is the most important piece, I think, for any event organizer, for any business, right? When you look at these platforms, what type of data do you typically share with the event creators? And what do you think is something that, at least through your surveys, I kind of want to dig into the surveys a bit as to what are some interesting pieces that maybe you guys see that maybe a big ticketing company wouldn't?
So much.
Do the fun ones.
Yeah. I think some cool things are around like, one is we're really, really bullish that there are these, like the real growth is to come from like the power attendees. And so trying to spot who are the people that go to a ton of events and maybe also have transactions that are over 2 tickets. because that means that they're the one who are like making the plans, bringing their friends, etc.
Yep.
And how do you incentivize those people to beef up how much, input to act that they're making on the platform? And so basically we ran a survey of like all of our top attendees. We found that when we asked them, would you want to make money bringing your friends to events? 89% of them said yes, right? And so now it's like, all right, how do we incentivize these people to bring them to events? How do we talk to curators and organizers about how much are you willing to offer your attendees, right? Because if you guys are offering enough, we can turn them all into promoter automatically for you, right? We can even do the hard work. So it really comes down to like marketing has to be done automatically and using data to match incentives with outcomes and matching the incentive of the consumer that wants to bring friends to the event anyways and get paid with the outcome of selling more tickets for the organizer anyways. And then what's the, percentage that they need to get that done. So yeah, I think 89% wanting to bring their friends was really interesting. I think what else? Again, the 3x year over year thing was really interesting for people that make over 100K on Posh. Yeah, there's a lot of different metrics. I think what's also interesting is like the business is, really 50-50 split down the middle on like product led versus sales led growth. I think a lot of companies try to veer one direction or the other, but really to build something that's like really massive, you have to do both well. Because on the long tail side, if you're only product led, you'll never get the festivals. And if you're only sales led, we all know the festivals can get expensive. And then there's people, the economically, there's things that don't make sense, large advances, et cetera. So you really have to have the best of both worlds. You have to validate the long tail with the festivals and get a few cool ones that people respect so that they start hosting their birthday parties or sushi comedy events, whatever it might be, right? So yeah, I think kind of rambling, but.
No, it's all valuable information. You touched on, you said the A word. Advance. I was in a couple of calls this past week actually where that came up. And again, these are big numbers that certain ticketing companies are providing to promoters and to festival producer, whoever it might be. What is sort of your feeling on that? Or is there a specific formula that you look at? Just from sitting with you for over the past 30 minutes, I understand how Posh is a little bit different from a platform perspective. Is that something that you guys get into quite a bit, is like having that conversation about in advance?
Yeah, it's definitely a conversation that's brought up a lot, right? We never are initiating that conversation.
Right.
I think in general, it comes back to what I was saying is the goal of the kind of top end of the company and top end expansion plan, which is like we provide strategic advances to organizers in markets that we're usually not as strong in, right? So that they can help validate us, right? But the downfall of a lot of these ticketing companies is usually overextend themselves on advances and thinking, oh, we're going to book this much revenue. What happens? The festival promoter completely overshot their projections, which those projections bled into your projections as the ticketing company. And then now you're missing projections. And then also if people default on the advance, these LLCs are 1 or 2 person LLCs. There's not really a lot of recourse. So much up in the air to where like it's really, really a high risk thing to be doing at scale. And so it has to be more of a strategic advance than like the way that the business scales, right? Like if we stop doing advances tomorrow, we're still confident we can scale the business, but we do know that they're helping us scale faster. So yeah, it's usually like a market that we're not so strong in. We just gave one in like Seattle, for example. We didn't really have as much market share there. The group we signed is going to do 50,000 tickets a year. And now we can go start all of our other community efforts, et cetera, right? And so it really kickstarts a market. But what we're more interested in also, I think another thing is you might be referencing like signing bonuses when you're talking about advances. We have something called Posh Capital Advances, which is kind of those microloans I was talking about, which we do a lot. And that's a little bit different than like signing bonuses, which is just like non-recoupable cash. Advances are where I give a loan on future ticket sales. You give it back to us. We give you another one. And that I think is the key to a lot of these companies scaling so aggressively on Posh is, we've given some people up to, a few $100,000 for their event. And obviously they had a lot of history. They gave us years and years of P&Ls, et cetera. But when you do that for people, like they can do millions of dollars, right? And you can help them expand their business. They have the audience. Like this is kind of a flip problem of like what I've been saying is the average problem. A lot of people, the problem is I can't sell tickets. Then there's this niche of people who are like, I have a really strong audience and I can sell tickets, but I don't have the capital to put on the type of event or the size of event that like I know I could host. And those are the really excited people because you give them capital and immediately they're putting pedal to the metal, right? And getting it going. But finding those people, making sure that the projections are proper, right, et cetera, is definitely an arduous process that the team is definitely working on every day.
I respect that. Yeah, that's a very thoughtful, strategic way to look at that. And I have to defer to Natalia here because I know this is a topic she likes to chat about.
Yes, I was just going to ask you, based on my experience also working in ticketing, advances, sign-on bonus, it's a big educational gap, especially for those top accounts that you're trying to bring on. How do you manage the balance between educating prospects on what a loan is versus an advance versus a sponsorship, what they can ask for that's actually realistic, and balancing that with the product development needs of your team?
That's a great question. I think actually that like they're actually a little bit more educated nowadays than they used to be when we started the company, because they've been offered, like, again, I never bring up the conversation because it's like just not a smart thing to do. Usually it's someone who's been on the platform for a while. Hey, an AE at this company was hitting me up. They offered me, billions of dollars, whatever it might be. I love the product. I love the team, but like can't turn down, literally sometimes $250,000, right? And so then the conversation opens, and sometimes, a lot of times actually we get them to take less from Posh to stay with us because they understand the value of the company and the product, et cetera. But yeah, I think from an educational standpoint, like they usually understand, but like you said, a lot of the sell is on the product side and saying like, look, at the end of the day, you're going to get less money here. And I think almost being strict about that, like this is not the place you're going to get the biggest check. But what you are going to get, right? And people all see our funding online. We just raised $22 million in July. And so they think that they're going to come get a check. And I have to explain to them, that money is to invest in a product that will serve millions, if not billions of people. And I want to build things that not only provide you value, the organizer, but also hundreds or thousands of other organizers value as well. And so what I won't be giving you is the biggest paycheck here, but what I will be giving you is the fastest iteration cycle to where, again, you run all these surveys, you do customer interviews, like features that you want, tell me what you want. It'll most likely be baked into the roadmap and launched in like 3 to 6 months, right? And I think that's beyond any feature itself. The competitive edge is our ability to ship faster than any other company in the space.
These are big mountains that are moving. So you're probably right.
Yeah. And I think that's really what it is, right? Is like, hey, you're not going to get the biggest paycheck, but you're going to have a business partner. You're going to get advances on future ticket sales. I'm not going to give you a signing bonus, but I will invest right in your brand as long as you keep paying us back. And you're going to actually get heard on a product side. And, when people see like one feature get shipped that they requested a few months ago, the sense of ownership that they feel in the platform, right? And respect for us for actually listening to them because they haven't listened to you for 10, 15 years,
decade,
right? Immediately makes them, stay forever and understand and be happy that they, turn down the larger signing bonus.
That's super interesting. I think also it's smart that you guys are educating prospects on this is what we can and can't do, and this is how product will actually support your long-term growth. I do see a lot in this space that because a lot of competing ticketing platforms go out and give these crazy bonuses, it almost educates promoters or event creators. This is not your cash, use it as you want. And most often that creates a community of promoters that are not self-sufficient in their brands because they're always getting injections of cash from their next ticketing partner. Yep. What are your stances on that? And what do you think can change in the space in the next 5 years so that culture is kind of disintegrated a bit?
It's a great question. I think it's definitely sad that is the case, right? These people, a lot of the success sometimes is predicated on signing bonuses, whether it's a venue or whatever. Like a lot of them literally will be like, yeah, I have a signing bonus in my financial model for next year.
And it's a temporary success, right? Because they're not building it or keeping it or growing it.
Exactly. And it's really just like, they're almost adding it to like revenue as like a line item, right? And so I think to answer your question about like what needs to be done for this to change, it really does come top down from the VC angle. Like I think as a lot of the companies that received funding start to underperform and VCs don't make the returns that they wanted, they're going to stop providing these multi-$100 million funding rounds to companies whose strategy is strictly just to pay for contracts. And so, if the capital keeps coming, there's no reason that it's not going to keep flowing down to these signing bonuses. But I think personally what I'm seeing is a shift in VC just in general, where people are becoming a lot more revenue oriented, a lot less like growth at all costs mindset, and more about sustainability and efficiency. And so I think in general, it comes down from like the technology space overall, investing less into these things, right? And then there's other components of like, if the technology space invests less into them, does that propagate the Ticketmaster monopoly, right? Because then there's less funding from the bottom up to compete with them. So then they can just outweigh everyone and provide signing bonuses. Maybe, but then there's other things, right? Antitrust, et cetera. So there's so many things that have to happen to this, like signing bonuses as a thing to really be wiped from the space that I don't think they will be. And they've been around, 20 years now. But I do think from a startup perspective, and at least for like the smaller promoters, like the bigger venues will always be getting signing bonuses, right? But there's not really any reason why people that are making $100K a year should be getting signing bonuses. They should just be getting really hands-on support to make $200K a year. That's what I tell them. I'm like, if I'm tripling people in your space on average, you're going to make $300K next year. You're only making $100 this year. Is that really worth $50K signing bonus today, right? Or you want to scale your business and have a business on your hands that's making $300K a year consistently?
In a sustainable business, right?
Some people get it, and some people are like, I just want to go, buy a Tesla or something, right?
So thanks for providing all of your wisdom in this amount of time that you've been building Posh. But I think our time is starting to wind down here a bit. And so what I like to always end the show on is, for you, Avante Price, like, what would be the perfect travel experience? Is it a ticketed event in a destination of your choice? I mean, you're a New York City guy. You've probably been traveling quite a bit. So I would expect that you probably have a pretty good checklist of things that you'd like to accomplish from a travel experience perspective. What do you think?
There's a few. Yeah, I think ever since I was like 14, I always wanted to go like Tomorrowland because I always watched the videos and things when I was like in class and things. I never have been yet. But I think honestly, now that I, get older and things, that does seem a little less interesting to me. I think the ideal travel plan that I actually did do last year was I flew to Costa Rica and I went to this little like festival thing in the jungle. And it was really insane. You walk through, you have to take you basically sit on the back of a pickup truck for like 30 minutes and they take you to this like stage in the middle of the jungle at night with just dirt and trees around you. And it's absolutely insane. Like Function 1, top sound. And I think that was one of the most unique experiences because you're in nature, but you're also at, a fun party and just dancing and enjoying the time. And, it's 80, 90 degrees. Yeah, that was...
Who headlined that? I mean, because it's got to be around Arenal volcano, like that set of jungle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was not too big of a headliner. It was this woman, Carlita. She's been blowing up in like the kind of underground space. But yeah, she's a cool DJ.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, congratulations on all of your success. And we know that you're going to probably blow this up into something bigger at some point. So we appreciate spending time with us here on Tickets to Travel. And hopefully you'll come back soon.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Attention travel and ticketing innovators. Whether you're a startup disrupting the industry or an established company ready to take your distribution strategy to the next level, Expo Travel is your ultimate partner in online travel and ticketing distribution. We specialize in helping businesses of all sizes optimize their operations, expand their reach, and unlock new revenue streams. And for startups looking to grow, we partnered with top venture capital syndicates to help you secure the funding you need to turn bold ideas into thriving businesses. From refining businesses to scaling operations and raising capital, Expo Travel is here to drive your success. Visit Expo Travel today. That's xpotravel.com for a consultation. And let's transform the way the world travels, one innovation at a time. Expo Travel, because the future of travel and ticketing starts with you.